grab me afterwards if you've got any questions on anything I talked about today. There's not enough time for questions at the end. So I'm going to be talking about product management for grey areas, when your product sits between something which customers buy and a service allows your business to function. So first of all, a little bit about my product journey. So I started off doing product management, although I didn't know that's what it was when I was doing it. When I was working for a company automating switchgear, electrical switchgear around the world. After that, I worked for a smart energy startup doing in-home electricity and gas monitoring. Then after that was at Dyson. So my first time at Dyson, I was doing product management for our back-end cloud services that supported all of our now millions of connected products. And then most recently, I'm now doing product management for all the software which actually goes into our robots. But in all the roles that I've been in, it's never been just software. The product that the company was selling to customers wasn't a software-only product. It was only part of the solution. And that's left me with a nagging doubt, because a lot of the things that I've been reading great books around product management, there's a lot talked about when the product that you're selling is a software product. I've found not nearly so much about when your product isn't a software product, what's the role you should be doing. And the sort of questions that I've been asking myself is, so what actually is my product? What am I the product manager for? Who is the customer or user that I'm building it for? And actually, what's my role in that? But then coupled with that, I've learned to really enjoy that role, working with the sort of conflicting roles of customer, user, growing with the teams. So as our teams become more product-focused teams, how actually growing with them, and seeing the product teams emerge. So, fingers crossed, I'll give you one or two insights that allow me to do that over the few years that I've been doing it. So first of all, about nagging down, am I doing the right thing? So what I found is, a lot of what you read about in great books around product ownership, product management, is you shouldn't be doing any of these things. You shouldn't be doing any project management. You shouldn't be doing people management, no release management, no engineering, no feature teams. Well, if you're doing these things, you're doing it wrong. But I was finding that my role doesn't fit into that neat box. I found that the gap that the teams I was working in, the gap needed to be filled, how I can best help the teams, needed me to be doing some of these things in order for us to actually work. So that question I had was, well, is everything I'm doing actually anti-pattern? And am I just doing it wrong? If I'm doing some of these things, whilst I'm also doing some things which hopefully are good product management, then am I actually doing it wrong? So, that side of things, that's sort of where I was. So what would be great would be if you just pop your hand up if you've ever found that, if you're doing product management, if you've found that you've been had to do something that you really shouldn't be doing, or either that, or if you work in a company where the product isn't a software-only product. Cool, wonderful. So the good news is we're not alone. So, that's the downside. But on the upside, I have been prioritising trying to prioritise based on value to our customers. So what is it, back from Kelvin's talk, what is it that we're doing which is truly going to be valuable to the customers? What is it that's going to be valuable to the users within the business? What is it that the company actually needs us to do in order to be successful? I have been trying to focus on iterative development, trying to build a little bit, get it in front of some people, test it and see, is this going in the right direction? Are we doing the right thing if we were to continue and expand this feature? I have been trying to own the product, been trying to talk to a lot of customers that are using the product, been trying to talk to users in the business that are using the product, talking to lots of stakeholders in the business to understand what is it that we need to do, what is it that we need to build that will solve the problems for you. I'm trying to act as a catalyst for communication, so I try to, when I can see that we've got a tricky problem, but we're not describing it correctly, so the people that are building the solution don't fully understand the problem the customer's got, trying to bring those people together, get the customer in front of the people building it, so they can truly understand, well, what actually is the problem we're trying to solve. And to the best of my knowledge, to the best of my ability, I try to inspire the team in terms of what will it mean if we can build this thing, so that we can solve this problem for the customer or the user. What will it be? What will the benefit be to them? What will the benefit be to our company if we're able to do it? So there's that conflict. All these lots of things I know I should be doing, I'm having to do some of, but also I'm doing some things that I think that should be helping. Am I just doing it wrong? And then so it was December of last year, just when we were really locked down, there was nothing else you could do apart from read books. I picked up a wonderful book, which had only been published a couple of months earlier, on Kinefin. So Kinefin is a sense-making framework developed by Dave Snowden. And it's a Welsh word, it means a place of your multiple belongings. And even just the description of that, so, okay, this is good, because I'm doing more than just one thing here. And in reading the book, it was truly like it was like a breath of fresh air. So, okay, I understand now why I've got this conflict. I understand why there's some things I'm doing which I'll read about are good, and some things which I'm doing which I read about I shouldn't be doing. So Dave's framework, one of the key, I could talk for an hour or more on just Kinefin actually, but I'm not going to. So just touching on it very briefly, it's the idea of you can describe a problem in one of, or categorize it in one of 5 ways. You can either have clear problems, complicated problems, complex problems, or chaotic problems, or a problem that sits somewhere between, you don't know where. And depending on the sort of problem that you're faced with, the approach that you need to take is different. So if you've got a clear problem, then techniques like lean, techniques like classic waterfall project management methodologies work very well, they're very effective with clear problems. If you've got complicated problems moving into complex, that's where Agile works really well. Agile is very effective if you've got problems in one space. If you've got complex problems where you actually need to run lots of experiments, you need to try and figure out, well, what is the right thing to do? Because I don't know until I try it and see. Then you're in that complex space. And equally, you've got chaotic problems where actually you're just not going to know, you're just going to have to try something to see what happens. And see on the output of that, how should we best respond next? But the really nice thing about this, and the thing that really made sense to me, was that the approach that you take based on the sort of problem you're faced with is different. It's not one solution for any problem that you're faced with. Based on the sort of problem that you're faced with, you will have to take a different course of action. Now, if you're doing product management in a team and you're trying to change the way that product management is done, you're very much in this space. There's no way you can possibly hope to predict what the effect is going to be of the sort of changes that you're going to make. You're going to have to make small little changes, see how that works, see how that works with the people working with the team, see how that works with the customers, see how that works with the company, and understand, basically, did that work? No, it didn't work. It didn't work for these reasons. I have to try something else. And one of the things that Dave Snowden talks an awful lot about is when you're working with complex adaptive systems, you can't just say, right, I'm going to go there, I've got a plan to go there, I'm going to get there. You have to keep nudging yourself in the right direction. To try something, see if it's worked. If that doesn't work, course correct, adapt. So the fact that you're doing more than just product management probably is going to be expected, because the hole that you will be filling in any company will be different. And certainly that's been the case. The sort of things that I've had to do in the different roles that I've done, working with different teams, it's been different from team to team. They needed different things from me. So, starting to feel a little bit happier now, but okay, well maybe I'm not doing everything completely wrong. And then somebody else, so you're a product manager, what's your product? Well, it's not a whole robot, it's the software that goes into the robot. So, actually, what I'm the product manager for is part of it, it's part of the puzzle, it's part of the solution. And what does that mean then? So does that mean my product owner, my product manager, my business analyst, my Agile coach, or all of those? Now, in Alan Kelly's recent book on the art of Agile product ownership, which is absolutely wonderful, Alan talks about a product owner acting more as a product manager if they're building features for an end customer, and a product owner acting as a business analyst if they're building features for somebody else within the company. And I found, well, actually, okay, I understand that now, but I also understand I'm probably doing both. I'm probably doing some product management and some business analyst, because actually the product that I'm responsible for has both users and customers. So how do you grow? So how do you grow teams in that environment, and how do you grow yourself as a product manager in that environment? So, growing the right shape pieces. The first thing you have to work out is, well, how should we align? So should the team or teams be aligned around long-term features of the product? Should they be aligned around the different business categories within the company, or should they be aligned around technical domains? Or is it a bit of both? Now, what I've tended to find in the different wonderful teams that I've worked with is that we've started off in one place and have gradually evolved to somewhere else. So, and that was based on the sort of problems we were trying to solve at the time. So we started off very much aligning teams around technical domains, because that's where we had the biggest challenges. So we were trying to get a consistent way of working. We were trying to work out how can we all work together with multiple teams in order that we can release frequently. And so the biggest problems that we had initially were actually technical problems. How are we going to get that consistency? How are we going to get everybody to understand the patterns that we want to use? And then as that becomes embedded, then we started to change, and actually teams started to take on a little bit more of ownership of or alignment with long-term features. And that leads on to long-term ownership, but this is another, what I found is a really key aspect, is that in order for things to work well, in order for you to actually be a product manager or a product owner, the team that you're working with, they need to own something. And what does ownership mean? It means understanding how it's performing. It means looking at the metrics, and looking in Grafana, looking in CloudWatch, looking in Splunk, looking in Elasticsearch, whatever. Looking at metrics that can tell you how is my product actually performing for consumers of that product, be that customers, be that users. Also looking at, okay, how can it be improved? What is it that's not working with this product at the moment? What is it where it's not doing what we want it to do? And also, how can we reduce the technical debt? How can we reduce the stuff that's holding us back from being able to make it better? So, along with those things, certainly all the teams that I've worked in, there has been, when I've gone into them, there have been certain other sort of what was talked about in a wonderful book called Team Topologies, again, it was published relatively recently by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pace, was you could well find natural fracture planes within the company you're working in now, where actually start with that. If there's a natural grouping already, start with that, and then evolve from there. And what Matthew and Manuel talk a lot about is how you can have within a company some teams that are aligned along technical domains. Maybe you've got a platform team that all the other teams rely on. And then you've got other teams which are more focused on building out specific long-term features for customers. So that's the good side. So, okay, so you're starting to get an idea. Okay, we've got some ownership now. So the team has got some ownership of something, so I can understand, starting to understand what the product is that we're responsible for, but what do you have to be aware of? So the first thing is local optimization. So as teams actually take ownership of something, it can be very easy for the team to become focused on just that bit. Because you're monitoring the metrics, you're trying to understand what's performing, and you can lose sight of, but actually we're part of the puzzle here. This is the product isn't just this bit, it's the product that we sell is the whole thing. So it's making sure that you're always taking that bit of a step back and understanding, although our bit's working, is the whole working. Next thing is then, if your team's got responsibility for something, but you're not looking at how it's performing, or you're not looking at how to improve it, you're not looking at how to reduce technical debt, then actually you don't own it. So you may have nominal responsibility for it, but you don't own it. It's very hard to do product ownership if your team's not caring about this stuff. And the last thing is, if your team's focus is currently changing, is continuously changing, so if you're moving from being responsible for one bit of the system to another bit of the system, to another bit of the system, you haven't got that long-term ownership, then it's very hard to do product management. You're effectively just doing project management at that point. So the last thing is trying to get there in one jump. So wonderful books like Empowered from Marty Cagan talk about you really want empowered product teams. But if that's not where you're starting, then don't try to get there straight away. But you need to build on something. You need to build on the idea that the team already owns something, and then once the team owns something, you can then move towards empowering that team. So you start to get a bit of an idea now. I sort of understand what my product is, starting to get a bit of a feel for what my product is. And then think, okay, who's my customer? So who am I building for? Is it a customer? Is it a user? So what I found, when you're building a product which has both end customers and users and stakeholders within the company. Wherever possible, always try and describe the thing you're building in terms of the customer first. So if it's possible to describe the new thing that you're building in terms of the benefit it will bring to the end customer, as Kelvin talks about, the person who's actually going to put their hand in their pocket and spend money on the thing that you're selling, try and describe it in those terms first. Only then, if you can't describe it in those terms, then think about describing it in terms of the user within your business who's actually going to be using the product. So a good example of this is probably if you're building out a feature to allow your customer support team, for example, to better support your product. You could describe that in terms of the benefit of users. If your customer support team is more effective, your customer is going to be happier. But you're quite a long way from that. When you think about how we're going to measure whether we're successful, it's going to be very hard to, very abstract to measure the success of the thing that you're building to allow your customer support team to be better if you're measuring in terms of the impact on customer happiness, for example. So if you can't easily describe something in terms of how it will benefit for the customer, then describe it in terms of how it will benefit the internal users within your company. And equally then, if you're not even building it for internal users within your company, but maybe you're building it because you're, as I am now, in a space where the software's got to come together with mechanical components and electrical components in order for the product to actually work at all. So I've got internal stakeholders which unless the software is doing something, the product won't do anything at all. Then describe it in terms of benefits to those external stakeholders. But to try and do it, if you can't do it in terms of the customer, do it in terms of the user. If you can't do it in terms of the user, do it in terms of the internal stakeholder. And then you're looking at, well, what should we measure? And what you come up against here is then lead times. So if you're building a product like a physical product, which could take 2 or 4 years to develop, it could be 2 years before you actually put your new physical product in the hands of people who are actually going to pay for it. So how do you get that feedback that you're building the right thing? Whereas if you describe something in terms of an internal stakeholder, you can very quickly get feedback that you've built the right thing. You'll get that almost immediately. You're like, yes, that's what I wanted. But if it's not doing what the end customer wants, then you've got a problem. So you've got to look at, okay, but how can we, if I can't put it in front of the person who's going to pay for it, how do I put it in front of somebody who is a proxy for that person? I.e., although they maybe have to pay for it, they're not invested in how well it works, for example. So can I give it to somebody within the company who's never used it, isn't being responsible for it, but can give me feedback on if were you to have gone out and bought this, would this actually have solved the problem for you? The next thing to this is then, because you're doing this role, which is part business analyst, part product owner, part project manager at times, what that does mean is that you're quite often interacting with a lot of other project managers. Because certainly from different parts of the company, there are people that don't know nothing about software. So you're talking to a lot of project managers. But because you're in those conversations, because you're doing that little bit of project management to allow you to interact with the other parts of the company, you can actually start having conversations about, okay, we're going to build this new product feature, which is going to include software, it's going to include mechanical components, it's going to include electrical components, etc. How are we going to measure whether it's actually doing what the end customer wants? And because you're in that conversation, you can start talking about how you're going to measure it. Whereas if you weren't in that conversation, you wouldn't be able to start talking about how you're going to measure it. Then the last bit is, because you're doing part of it, because you're doing part of the puzzle, if your part is working really well, does that mean the whole end product is successful? Not at all. You can have the best user registration system in the world, but if when the user gets in there, they can't actually do anything, if your whole product isn't successful. And vice versa, it's certainly possible in a large system that the whole product can be very successful when actually your bit isn't. Now, ultimately, the product can be even more successful, probably, if your bit was working well. But you do have to take that step back and understand, well, either because it's going wrong, is that something that I can influence? And equally, if it's going well, does that mean that there's nothing that we should do? So, things to be aware of. So, because if you're working in a company where you're working with a lot of other people from different disciplines, maybe, or different parts of the business that don't know about software, you're talking to a lot of other people doing project management, for example, it can be very easy to slip into just thinking about delivering against a specification, for example, in terms of, because you spend a lot of your time talking about people that want you to deliver certain things to allow them to do the bits they need to do. So you somehow need to keep yourself honest. You need to keep yourself, how am I going to keep thinking about things in terms of the customer, the end customer and the users? So basically, you need something to give you a slap. So I've found that, so really wonderful, so Martin Hagen has written a number of wonderful books around product management. I found a lot of what he's written, I would love to be able to do, but I don't find myself being able to do so much of it. But it's great because it challenges you. It makes you think, okay, how can I get closer towards that? And like Sir John Cutler as well, on Twitter, Sir John talks an awful lot about the sort of things which you really hope to be doing, but maybe you don't find yourself doing necessarily so many of those. But it's helpful, I think, just to keep challenging yourself, just so you don't slip too much. The other thing is, when you're building a product which has got customers and then users, there is a danger that you can optimize for internal users within your company too early. So if you're building a brand new feature, and you're thinking about, okay, so this is the thing that we want to do for the customer. This is the feature that the end customer is going to pay for it. This is what they're going to get. But also, when it doesn't work, we need to support it. So we need people within our company to be able to understand how it's working, be able to support it. But until you've actually demonstrated that that end feature does what the customer needs, then there's no value, actually, in working out how you can support it. So you need to figure out, first of all, if we build this thing, does it actually do what the customer needs? If it does, only then start thinking about, okay, and how are we going to support it? So you want to build a little bit to work out, does this actually solve the problem for the customer? If we were to build this thing, does this thing actually solve this particular problem? And if it does, then let's think about, okay, and for all the other parts of our business which are going to need to be able to support this, how are they going to be able to support it? How are we going to be able to measure that it's working? The flip side of that is that if you start off and you're focusing purely on the end customer and understanding, okay, is this what they need? There is a danger that you never optimize for the internal experience. And again, that becomes really very problematic very quickly. So it's a balance. You need to work out, okay, well, yes, we've proved this is valuable. Definitely this does solve the problem which the customer needs. Now, all the other people within our business, even us as a team, what is it that we need in order to be able to support it? What is it that we need to be able to extend this feature? So, with that background, with that backdrop, so what's my role? What are the things that I try to do in the teams which I work with, and what are the things I try not to do? So, first of all, the thing in all the different teams I work with, the thing that I found is the most useful is focus on this idea of incremental delivery. Can we build a little bit of it and get it in front of somebody and work out, is that actually solving the problem that you want to solve? The next thing is then always, if at all possible, focus on the end customer first. And if you can't describe the new feature that you're building in terms of the end customer, then let's look at how we can describe it in terms of the user or the internal stakeholders. Wherever possible, try and make your decisions based on data. And this can be hard because quite often you probably haven't necessarily got the metric. If you're working in a system which has evolved and maybe when you started you hadn't put in the metrics which allow you to understand how it's performing. What are the different proxy metrics you can use to give you a clue? So how are we going to measure whether the thing that we're currently doing now is having, or the thing we're going to do is having an effect? And other proxy metrics we can use whilst we're putting some more in. So whilst we're adding additional instrumentation to allow us to better to understand, is there anything that we can use in the meantime to make sure that we're going in the right direction, we're building the right thing? The next thing then, and this is very coupled with incremental delivery, when the pressure comes on, and rather than flexing the timescales, try and flex the scope first. So let's try and build a little bit first, and then build a bit more, and then build a bit more, and then it becomes very much a sort of a company commercial decision about have we got enough to launch now? Because we've been building incrementally and we've been adding features incrementally, we've got the ability to say, well, we haven't got to the end step, we haven't got to the spec that we had when we started. But is it enough? Is it enough that actually this will solve the problem for our customers? And particularly if it's a product that you can update once you've got it with your customers, is it enough to start with? Is it enough to start with? And then we can make it better and make it better. The next one is then empowering the team. But this one is, what I found is it's very much a pull. So you can't, if you started with teams which have been working to specifications, been working with specifications for a long time, you can't go straight to that team and say, please solve this problem for me. You've got to build on a foundation. The team has to feel ownership of something first. So they need to be, so the piece of the system they're responsible for, the product they're responsible for, they've got to be measuring how it's working. They've got to be thinking about how it can improve. They've got to be actively looking at how we reduce the technical debt in this part of the system. And once you've got that ownership, the teams actually pull. They want you to come to them with the problem, not the solution you want building. But it's very hard to jump straight to that if the team hasn't got ownership of something first. And then the last thing is deliver more frequently. And what I found is that, having just listened to Kelvin, I realised there was a few words that I missed on the end of here, which is deliver working product more frequently. So what I haven't explicitly put in here was deliver value more frequently, because I think that comes after you've got through this place where you've got all over the roadblocks which are holding you back from being able to deliver frequently. So once the whole team has got into this mindset and way of working where we will be releasing something every week. So every week at least we will be getting something out. It may be small, it may be tiny, but every week we're going to get something out. And because you're doing that then, it enables your idea of incremental delivery. So we've got that cadence now, we're getting something out. Let's get a little bit out and see if it's working. So what do I try not to do? So I try not to get too focused on the product that the product I'm responsible for, which is part of the overall product. So I try to keep taking that step back and understanding, although maybe our product is working well, is the overall product, is the whole product working well, or is there other things that we need to do to make the whole product work well? I try not to get too technical. This can be hard, particularly when you're interacting with lots of other people in the company who maybe aren't familiar with Agile software or not familiar with software at all. And there can be an expectation that you not only understand the product, you understand all the technical aspects as well. And there's almost an expectation that you'll be able to answer all those questions. So I try very hard not to answer technical questions, but ensure that I get the right people who understand the technical, who understand the answers, into the discussion to answer those questions directly, so we don't make the wrong call. I'm also try not to become too separated. So I try to use the whole product, not just the bit that I'm responsible for, but the whole product. I try to use the whole system. I try to use it as a user within our company would use it, and I try to support the product. So when it's not working, I try to understand, well, how can I collect some information to understand how this is working. What's the internal developer experience like? What's it like to support our product, both as a customer, a user within the business, but also as part of the team? And that, I found, gives me the sort of context for when there's problems, when there's new features that we're wanting to build. And when I'm talking to customers and I'm talking to users, it gives me that context of, I understand whether it's a big problem or whether it's a small problem, because I've just got a bit more of a handle on the system as a whole. So, lastly, loving the journey. So these are things I've learned along the way. That your role doesn't have to fit in a box. If you're not doing the role that you read about as this is what you should be doing as a product manager, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be challenging yourself to see how you can improve, but don't keep beating yourself up if you're doing a few things that you read about as you shouldn't be doing. That actually, the ownership of your team and within your teams will evolve. Don't worry about trying to get there straight away. And in terms of don't worry about trying to get to be a product, so that all your teams are product teams straight away. Get ownership of something first. Get the team happy that they're responsible for it and measuring it and they understand how it's working. And then actually the ownership will evolve naturally. Keep challenging yourself so you don't slip. And then lastly, enjoy the journey. So I found it's tremendously rewarding growing as a product manager with the team. So getting better at being a product manager for the team as the team gets better as well. And it's very rewarding actually seeing product teams emerge. So when you start working with a team, not necessarily focused on, there's not necessarily ownership to start with, but seeing that ownership evolve and then seeing the team start to pull and say, well actually, I don't want to describe me the solution you want, to tell me the problem you want solved. And then also working out how to get there. I mean, it's not easy, but what often we're building, it can be very, very rewarding, almost as rewarding as getting the product working really well for customers, is getting the teams working really well to be able to build products for customers. Because you're in it for the long run. Quite often your teams will be going on to build other products and other products. So there's a tremendous amount of, tremendously rewarding getting to that place, as well as having a product which is working really well for customers. So these are some of the books that I've been reading recently. I think most of them have been published in the last probably couple of years. There's loads more, but these are a few that I felt will cover different areas and really, and certainly be useful for me in sort of challenging the way that I think about product management. That's me. I've got no idea how long I've got for questions.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, oh wonderful, great. Does anybody have a question?
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, really interesting. I was just wondering, you didn't say the word platform at all. I'm wondering whether that's intentional or whether. So there's a couple of things really. I'm sort of reflecting on a lot of the challenges with the identity that you're presenting now. I think sometimes if you're a platform product, then you'll that degree removed from the end customer, they're not buying the product and everything. Also, I'm wondering if you have any experience of challenging the actual org design. So it could be that you find yourself in a component and actually you need to look at whether it's a sort of the main product structure or something sort of order, whether you have experience of challenging actually I've got this org design.
So yes and yes. So in terms of platform, I guess, so when I was the product manager for our back-end cloud service, we were doing our job really well if nobody knew that we existed. It was only when our system broke that people actually understood that we were there. And even so we were effectively building a platform which our mobile application development team and our team building physical products relied on. So they relied on us as a platform. But even then within that, we had teams within that. And we didn't start like this. We didn't start this way where we had teams responsible for building out tools which the other teams within our back-end cloud services team relied on. We originally started, we had effectively a separate infrastructure team. That's where we were. So we started with a separate infrastructure team. We had that was our bottleneck. That was our bottleneck for releasing because we had a separate team who was responsible for releasing everything that we did. That very much became a bottleneck, and it quite often meant that the way we approached getting something out there wasn't ideal. And so the first thing that we did is that we sort of disbanded that team. We embedded people with infrastructure expertise in each one of our application development teams, which worked well, worked much better. It definitely worked much better, but we found that then each of our development teams, was starting to build out their own tools to allow them to release frequently. And at that point, like, okay, we're starting to miss something now. There's something that we need a bit more commonality, we need a bit more coordination. So at that point, we said, okay, well, it's feeling like we need a team now that can build out some common tools which all of our other teams will rely on. And so within the back-end cloud service team, we then had a platform team that started then building out tools which the other teams could rely on. And they knew they were doing their job well if the other teams were actually using that rather than building their own thing. So, yeah, I guess my experience has been it evolves. But it definitely evolves from having your team being responsible for something and measuring it. And I think that to me has been the key. It's like, okay, well, once we understand what we're measuring, we understand how it's performing, we can then start looking at, okay, how do we improve that? In terms of changing org design, so I guess that's one way that we change the org design, but also we, at the moment, so so I've been with Dyson 5 years now. In that time, we've grown significantly. We've got much, much bigger. So I think in the sort of connected space I'm working, there were, I think there were 8 of us, something like that, when I joined Dyson. There's now several hundred people doing that. And so we've had to grow into, and we've had to look at how do we organise ourselves in that time. And we started off organising ourselves in terms of technical disciplines, because we had lots of technical debt in our mobile application, we had lots of technical debt in our back-end cloud services, and we're like, we need, as teams, we need to understand how do we build out a coherent way of working, how can we work in such a way that we can be releasing frequently, it's sustainable, etc., etc. So we found it was much more useful to group teams around that technical discipline. Now that has side effects, because then when you're wanting to build a new feature, it's cutting across lots of teams. But actually, that was the biggest problem we had at the time. It was like, it's never going to be sustainable for some of the stuff that Kevin was talking about. It's never going to be sustainable if we haven't got that way of working. We haven't got these clearly understood patterns within our teams. So we organised our teams around technical disciplines because that was our biggest problem. And then as that has become less of a problem, we've established those patterns. We've got a lot of good people now that can bring in new people when they start. We're starting to look at, okay, well actually now our biggest problem is not technical now. Our biggest problem is actually how can we more easily build out new features or new products. And so we're starting to look at now, well actually I think what we probably need to start grouping some teams, so we actually got a team more aligned around business standards, for example. So we've got teams now starting to become much more aligned around building out a particular product which has got within it people working on embedded software, people working on machine learning algorithms, people working on mobile applications. And we're even starting now to do that for electrical and mechanical stuff as well. So, because we're seeing that actually if we all work together as one group now, because we've got that solid technical base now, the thing that's going to enable us to move faster in the right direction now is going to be actually if we're working together as a team.
Andrew, can I just add to that? The question about product owners and platform teams. There's a nasty smell in software development that feels like it's a platform team. What they do is technical. Therefore, we'll take a software engineer and we'll make them up with a product owner. And you get this very technically driven platform. And that is completely the wrong thing to do. What you want to do is you want to put your best product owners, your best product managers on platforms that need to work twice as hard because you are one step removed from your customers. It's not a reason to abdicate responsibility and say techies know best. It's a reason to work twice as hard, but almost nobody does it. They turn over the platform team to techies and then complain about the techie teams.
Yeah. And it's really hard. It's really hard. Because you've got two different sets of people that you're building it for. Absolutely.
Yes, kind of running off that. There's a lot of talk about sort of breaking down silos and kind of reorganising the teams. How do you prioritise being one step removed and having your people and individuals manage those interactions? Often not very frustrating interactions. How do you sort of keep the morale up in the team and sort of make sure that there's no like responsibility creep as people kind of own the like product ownership and it transfers over? I feel like I've come across it where a lot of people think they have the same role in different teams, and how do you manage those interactions and making sure that people still have that passion?
Yeah, it's hard. I guess I found again trying to think of the best way to describe it. I think to me the root again it seems to have come back to ownership. Is once a team actually feels that they have true ownership of something, then they want to reach outside. They want to reach outside of their specific domain because they can see that we've made our bit as good as it can be, but actually our product's still not doing what we need it to do. And they actually want to reach out to those other bits in order to. But it comes from because they feel they've got ownership for something. They want it to be as good as it can be. And if you haven't got that ownership, it's very hard to build on without that. I guess is what I found.
Just back on that question, then you mentioned about the register, the register example about you can build the best register, but then people's user experience on it. What's the not the point, but you get that kind of question. As a product manager who doesn't own that particular part of the product, how would you go about kind of bringing up those conversations? So if it's not something you're particularly responsible to.
That's a good question. I guess I understand a lot now. So my responsibility is the software which goes into our robots. I haven't got responsibility for mechanical components or the electrical. So I've got the ability to influence the software. Quite often there are opportunities, because once you've shipped something, once the physical product is in a customer's home, you're not changing the electrics or mechanical parts. And quite often you look at ingenious ways to improve the experience just by changing the software. But because if you've got ownership of, you want your bit to be as good as it can be, equally your peers also want their bit to be as good as it can be. And so I found that people are very, very receptive to, once you've got that ownership, they're very receptive to say, well actually, I've been trying this robot in my home, and I've got this problem with it. Now, I can't see that there's anything we can do about this from a software perspective, but I can see there's an opportunity maybe if we were to change the mechanical design, that actually the whole experience will be better. And I think that comes from that sort of stepping back. It is not only focusing on your bit, but also understanding, okay, the whole product that we're selling, how's it working? And I found that if you've got good ownership, the person that you're engaging with really want to know when their bit isn't working as well. Obviously, if you have any more, just come and grab me any time over the next 2 days. I'll be delighted to talk about this stuff for hours.